Another Keeping Them Honest report tonight. Congresswoman Michele Bachman. She's back in the news. Is she trying to respin something she plainly said right here on this program? A false allegation she made. In a moment, we're going to play the tape for you so you can decide. You're going to recall this. Anderson invited her on to talk about the deficit and to identify some specific budget cuts for closing the gap. Instead, on the very first answer, she started talking about how much money President Obama's trip to India was costing, using a totally outlandish figure. Listen.
I think we know that just within a day or so, the President of the United States will be taking a trip over to India that is expected to cost the taxpayers $200 million a day. He's taking 2,000 people with him. He'll be renting out over 870 rooms in India, and these are five-star hotel rooms at the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel. This is the kind of over-the-top spending. It's a very small example, Anderson.
No one really knows the cost because for security reasons they don't disclose the cost. So this idea that it's, $200 million, whatever, is simply made up.
Well, these are the numbers that have been coming out in the press, and of course those are the numbers that I have to
Do you believe what you're reading in the press?
That are being... Well, should I believe what you say, Anderson? That's really the question.
Well, I'm not reporting this 200 million figure.
Now, to be fair, no one with any knowledge of the subject believes the trip cost anywhere near that much. The source of the story turns out to be a wire service report out of India quoting an unnamed provincial official. But the Congresswoman didn't mention that. In fact, it wasn't until Anderson challenged her that she even said the number was being mentioned in the press, let alone the overseas press, let alone a single unnamed source in the overseas press. And now, is she trying to spin her way out of it? Take a look at this, recently on the BBC.
You claimed that President Obama spent $200 million a day on a trip to India. It's been roundly ridiculed as a quote.
Actually, I didn't claim that. I was quoting a newspaper out of India, and I only used that quote after many national. It was, number one, it came out of the host country in India. It came out of a well-respected financial newspaper.
Well, and you believe that $200 million a day?
Well, excuse me, all I did is I quoted the newspaper. I quoted the newspaper, and major national figures here in the United States, many across the media, for several days had already been using that figure. The reason why it was so important is because the president has a 2-year history of out-of-control spending.
You still believe he spent $200 million a day on that trip? You believe that?
I didn't say whether I believe it or not. What I said is that I was quoting a newspaper.
Now, in fairness, many politicians say things for effect, and then they try to unsay them when someone puts them on the spot. But some do it more than others. And Ms. Bachman, well, she seems to have a history.
I'm wondering, would you categorically renounce the United States moving away from the dollar and going to a global currency?
That's Congresswoman during a hearing last year repeating another false allegation that the United States might drop the dollar. In fact, the story was quite a complicated one about a Chinese suggestion to create a new global reserve currency. Pretty esoteric stuff, but nothing to do with getting rid of the dollar. That notion came from a headline on the Drudge Report. And there's more. Just before the 2008 election, Ms. Bachman, appearing on MSNBC, suggested members of Congress, her colleagues, might be disloyal to their country.
Most Americans, Chris, are wild about America, and they're very concerned to have a president who doesn't share those values.
Okay.
What I would say is that the news media should do a penetrating expose and take a look. I wish they would. I wish the American media would take a great look at the views of the people in Congress and find out, are they pro-America or anti-America?
And later on Fox, she said this.
You've said you were concerned during the campaign that Obama had anti-American views, and you said the news media should do a penetrating expose and take a look at the views of the people in Congress and find out if they're pro-America or anti-America.
Actually, that's not what I said at all.
I'm reading your exact quote.
That's not what I said. It's an urban legend that was created. That isn't what I said at all.
By the way, in that BBC interview we played for you, the Congresswoman also insinuated that President Obama was anti-American. And we'll see how or if she explains that one next, I suppose. Joining us now, conservative blogger Eric Erickson and Democratic strategist Maria Cardona. Thanks to both of you for joining us.
Thank you, Sante.
Thank you. Eric, is this crazy or is this calculated? I mean, it's got a lot of people talking. Maybe she's not quite ready for prime time, some of her colleagues are saying. What do you make of this?
I think this goes beyond trying to keep politicians honest to going into the absurd. You know, I saw that report
on November 2nd during election night. Well, I was on studio at CNN. It was on the Drudge Report. She clicked through it. It was a media report out of India. It seems like when she was talking to Anderson about it on the 3rd, it seemed very clear she was basing her opinion based on that story, which was wrong, but was quoted all over the place. Now, we talked about it that night after that interview on Anderson, and we were all pretty dismissive of it. It seems very much like it wasn't $200 million. But let's not say this was her view. She was basing it off of something that was in the media, which
Eric,
was wrong.
I get that. I understand that. But look, I mean, is there a greater level of accountability someone like her needs to have? $200 million a day, Eric, is what that unnamed official in the Overseas Wire article said.
Look,
I mean, it doesn't pass the common
wouldn't
sense
have
test.
said it, but she did. It doesn't for you or for me, and I don't think she should have said it. I think she probably should have come out and said she was wrong, but that was November 3rd, and she's moved on, and the rest of us haven't.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, and that's fair, what she said. But the point is that is there a higher level of accountability when she makes statements like that? But let's move on for a second. Now, Maria, you've talked about this before. You could argue that Michele Bachman has actually got more media savvy than some of her colleagues, though, despite all this, couldn't you?
Well, what I would say in terms of her being media savvy is that she certainly knows how to become fodder on cable news. I mean, look at us. We are here talking about her. And, you know, to your point, Sanjay, this isn't the first time that she's done this. She's been making sort of ridiculous statements like this, outlandish statements, for the past 2 years at least, and even before that. So I think the problem for Michele Bachman, and frankly for her supporters, is that facts and video are pesky things. You know, they are on the record, and people know exactly what you've said and what you haven't said. And even though I think that this is something that she saw in a report, if it was something that she saw in a report and that she didn't really believe, that she just wanted to mention that this was part of her argument, she should have said, this is what reports from India are saying.
That's right.
She didn't say that. And so this, again, goes to the facts as to whether she even knows what she's talking about when she's going on any sort of TV or any interview.
All right,
but Sanjay, it's not just Michele Bachman's fault. It's also the media. Take the Obama's anti-American clip. You played the actual clip from where that comes from, and she didn't say Obama was anti-American. She referenced members of Congress, and are they pro-America or anti-American? And does Obama share a worldview that most Americans are sympathetic with? She did not connect him and anti-American, but the headline is Obama is anti-American.
All right, you know, to Maria's point, we spent a lot of time talking about Michele Bachman. So in that vein, she's not the only politician who's got some differences in the media. Sarah Palin is on the Media Blitz for her book. She got asked today an interesting question. I want to play this for you, whether she'd speak with journalist Katie Couric again. Here's part of her response.
I want to help clean up the state that is so sorry today of journalism. And I have a communications degree. I study journalism, who, what, where, when, and why of reporting. I will speak to reporters who still understand that cornerstone of our democracy, that expectation that the public has for truth to be reported.
Eric, tell me if you agree with this. I mean, she's basically been communicating through Fox News, Facebook, Twitter, a lot of social media. She's not been facing too many reporters at all these days. Is there any way to prep for a presidential run? Can she get away with that?
Oh, absolutely. In a Republican primary, she can be on Fox News and have millions of people watching her who, frankly, will go out and vote for her. She can go on talk radio. Conservatives have fantastic outlets other than the traditional news outlets to be able to communicate in a primary. It won't work in a general election, but to get her the nomination, it absolutely would. And I would agree with her. I wouldn't waste my time on CBS News either.
And Maria, I mean, if she does decide to run in 2012, do you think a presidential candidate can get away with avoiding reporters who ask tough questions throughout their campaign?
I don't think so, but I do tend to agree with Eric that this will work for her if she wants the Republican presidential nomination, because we have seen that the conservative right wing actually do have their own outlets and they do nurture their own spokespeople, and she happens to be one of them. So as a Democrat, I really hope that she does exactly what Eric mentioned and runs and wins the nomination, because he said it himself, and I completely agree. There is no way that doing that she could win the general election in 2012. And I think that she represents, and Michele Bachman represents, a huge challenge for the Republican Party, and that's demonstrating that they actually have mainstream views. Palin and Bachman do not represent those mainstream views.
I want to talk about some of the people that you're up against. I want to show you right now an interview with one of our favorites on this show, Michele Bachman of Minnesota, because we thought we'd unmasked her as a real Looney Tune at one point. And what we had done is we'd launched her into space because she thought we ought to have investigations by the media of all Democratic members of Congress for anti-Americanism, like bring back Joe McCarthy. Well, anyway, here she is trying to answer that question, why she's thinking the president's anti-American. This is an interview she did last week with the BBC. This, Kathleen, is what your group is going to be up against. Let's listen.
Thanks. You've suggested that President Obama is anti-American. Do you really believe that?
Well, you know, I've been very concerned about the policies that have come out of the White House, and I think I share that agreement with people who voted at the ballot box on the first Tuesday of November. They're rejecting the federal government foray into buying and owning an equity share.
But that's a different thing. Businesses. Do you think he's anti-American? Do you think that the President of America is anti-American?
Well, the policies that are anti-free enterprise are ones that are not familiar to the people of the United States. And that's why we saw such a strong reaction to the ballot box. In fact, the government takeover of health care is a great example. That's not what we've done here historically in the United States, and the people don't want to see the federal government control and dictate our health care.
Look at her eye contact. I asked her when we had her on election night if she's under hypnosis. She doesn't answer the question. She looks straight ahead in that kind of zombie-like manner, like she's waiting for somebody to flash a card, like in Manchurian Kennedy. I mean, I don't know what her state is. She apparently just got blown away running for leadership. So the members of the House and the Republican side know who she is.
They know that she's
a problem. But this kind of bizarro behavior, we come on, Mooney-like, if you will, and just stare into the camera and recite this. The question was, do you think the president's anti-American?
I don't know.
Yes or no? No, she talked about, what, equity shares and...
it's totally strange.
Impact segment tonight. If you peruse the left-wing media, you may have noticed some pundits saying that Sarah Palin might win the Republican nomination for president in 2012. But why are they saying that? Because they want it to happen, I believe. Recent CNN poll matched up President Obama against Governor Palin. President beats her 52-44.
She has sort of taken the reality show route, has maybe made people think, well, does she want to be president? It's a very unorthodox
so what you're
path.
saying is that maybe she doesn't have the gravitas for the job. Is that how you see it, Williams?
You know, first of all, let me say that I saw Sarah Palin the other day, and she gave me a big hug. So this is a very difficult segment for me to do, to just be the analyst here. She's very supportive of me. But I will say this, that I think that the polls, especially the polls in terms of favorability ratings, not head-to-head with Obama, but how do you view Sarah Palin? More than half of Americans have an unfavorable view of her.
But Ham submits that that's because the media has worked her over. It's almost like Fox News in a sense.
That's right. But
people
let me
don't
just
take the time to figure out what her record was in Alaska.
No,
they don't know what she's run on.
That's her point. Her point is that her record has been unfairly portrayed. But when the American people look at her record, unfortunately, people will say, hey, she quit as governor. They say, is she smarter than I am? Is she smarter than Bill O'Reilly? Would I trust her to lead me on foreign policy, on economic policy, on tax policy? And people say, you know what, she's a wonderful person, but I'm not sure that I trust her to that level and give her the gravitas.
Do you agree that the left-wing pundits, at least some of them, want her to get the nomination, the GOP nomination?
Absolutely. I don't think there's any question.
So that's why you see this spate of articles that she should go and that it could be done.
Absolutely. They love it. But let me just tell you that she is also given. You said a moment ago she'll do well on TV. She does well here and there. But, you know, like she's got this new book out and she takes a shot at Mrs. Obama. I think, you know, people think, we don't want that. We don't need that. I think people think, you know, they want somebody who's going to take us to a higher level.
That plays into Governor Palin's audience, does it not? That kind of
stuff. And the question is whether that audience broadens to include that coalition that brought Republicans to victory in 2010.
Would you recommend that Governor Palin not do that then?
Well, I think she does have some work to do to win those people over, and it's partly because of media coverage, and it's partly because of the very unorthodox path she's taken to maybe entering the race later. And so I think she does have some work to do earning those people's votes, and that doesn't mean she can't do it, which is why the left is mistaken to just assume that it's all bad if she runs.
Well, I think
she's very charming.
Look, I think they're looking at the potential challengers to Barack Obama, and they're saying that, look, if you have a person with high negatives, same thing with Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich, I don't think anybody would say Newt Gingrich isn't a smart guy. He's a smart guy, but he's got high negatives. Now, I don't know why they're pushing Sarah Palin over Newt Gingrich, Juan. Do you ever think about that? Newt Gingrich is going to run for president. He has high negatives. Why do the left favoring Sarah Palin over her?
Wait, I don't think there's anybody in America who doesn't think Newt Gingrich is a smart guy, and he's been Speaker of the House, and he's got a record of accomplishment contract with America that had tremendous success with the Republican Party. People may say, you know, I don't like some things about his personal life, negatives, all that, but they know he's got a record. With Sarah Palin, you know, Mike Huckabee said the other day, he said, Republicans, get ready. She may run away with the primaries. The Republican establishment is worried about her, and Democrats, for that reason, love her. And let me tell you, Barbara Bush said the other day,
I sat next to her once, thought she was beautiful, and I think she's very happy in Alaska, and I hope she'll stay there.